Thank you for coming. My name is Jonathan Franks, and I'm the spokesperson for the wide-ranging coalition of charities and recyclers standing in opposition to SB 450 introduced by Senator Galliani this session. As we said in our early April press conference when this bill was first scheduled for committee, it's just simply a bad bill. It's not needed. The Senate Committee on Governance and Finance's own analysis says it's not needed. In fact, this time the consultant actually poses the question, is there a legislative need for this when there are already statutory remedies in place? And what we've come to learn, this is not the first year that these group of charities and recyclers have faced this sort of attack. SB 450 is introduced entirely at the behest of Goodwill and its lobbyists, and it via a very complex immunity construct. It seeks to delegate for the first time in the state's history the state's power to convey civil immunity to towns and municipalities who can then piecemeal it out to property owners. And via that and several other mechanisms, it would make it next to impossible for charitable groups, for-profit recyclables, anyone to use a standalone donation box. Really, the only beneficiary of such a legislative program is Goodwill Industries. And it's unfortunate because our coalition very much supports their mission. It's further unfortunate that they don't support ours. And we've learned over the last 4 years really what this effort is about. It's about creating a monopoly. This has nothing to do with property owners' rights. And tonight, I think the groups, to their credit, that make up this coalition have taken a lot of hits over the years from Goodwill and others generally, and they're unfair hits, and they haven't really pushed back because they're in the philanthropic space, and they don't focus as much on how they look as what they do. And Goodwill spent nationwide $15 million lobbying last year. We didn't do that, and quite frankly, we don't think nonprofits should. And what we've come to learn via a variety of documents is that this really is their legislative intent here, is to create a monopoly. And last year, Governor Brown vetoed it, saying it could be more narrowly tailored to protect the interests of smaller charities. And, this year's bill didn't get any more narrowly tailored. It got much more aggressive. And the immunity construct drew opposition from the Trial Lawyers Association. And it's really unfortunate, but they are very much trying to create a monopoly, and there's no need. California Recycle stats put 880,000 tons of perfectly recyclable used textiles and shoes in California's landfills last year, and EPA estimates said it's only 15%. 15% of what could have been recovered was. So there's no inherent competition in the marketplace. And because Goodwill doesn't use a donation bin model, they are attempting to ice out what is the more convenient donation model. And we think donors should have choice. We think folks are smart enough to determine what charity inspires them, whether they just want to recycle used textiles and shoes at the most convenient location irrespective of the organization. We think folks are more than responsible enough and more than educated enough to do that. And I'm not sure also that if you look at property owners in this state is probably the most powerful stakeholder group. I'm not sure they need Goodwill's help advancing their interests, and I'm not sure it's really appropriate for Goodwill to step in there. But as we had our press conference the last time, and you heard from members of the coalition, the bill was suddenly pulled from Governance and Finance, and primarily because they simply didn't have any aggrieved property owners to support a property rights bill. And it's stunning to us that didn't occur to them in advance, but it didn't. And so as we were waiting for it to be rescheduled, we thought naturally that they would be looking for actual stakeholders. When questioned by the Sacramento Bee, they could produce one property owner that had issues having a unpermissioned bin removed. One property owner. And they proposed to turn state law on its end and claim a massive problem, but they could only find one property owner for the newspaper of record in this state. And we expected them to come back with more. Instead, they've come back with 17 new supporters for their bill, 12 of which we can conclusively link to them in this effort. The California Association of Realtors were one. They have 2 very active members that are both on Goodwill boards. 3, actually. 4, just gets better and better. The Greater Stockton Chamber of Commerce. 3 folks associated with directly with Goodwill, receiving awards and such. One property owner that's the future home of a Goodwill store, with an employee that's former chairman of the board of Goodwill Industries. Another property company, they're partners in the Housing Authority of San Joaquin, the HR Chamber of Commerce, where one of the executives was on a Goodwill board, a real estate company that had one of whom is a director at Goodwill. Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, same thing. New Directions Alcohol and Drug Awareness Program. Goodwill has been actively involved in providing them services, funding, and New Emergency Shelter for the Homeless. Goodwill's a vendor. It provides a voucher system for new image clients with clothing needs. And then we get to the 2 strangest supporters of the bill. They're, and I'm not making this up, their IT firm, I think it's their web design firm, and a marketing firm. We're not talking about aggrieved property owners. They're claiming an urgent problem with things dropping out of the sky in the middle of the night, and they haven't brought evidence of such. And, it is starting to become very apparent. And, I'm going to read to you, the LA County Supervisors have taken a position opposing this bill. It's a motion brought by Supervisor Antonovich, and his office tells us that he discovered this issue via press reports and asked his staff to investigate and decided to take a position. This motion passed 3-0 last week. Goodwill Industries is the sole beneficiary of SB 450, a bill that prevents organizations like the Salvation Army, Veterans Associations, and other charities from collecting donated clothing by establishing a monopoly. EPA statistics show that more than 880,000 tons of used clothing end up in California landfills annually. This bill will add to that by eliminating convenient collection models currently operating in neighborhoods. This measure is entirely advanced by the motivations of special interests and should be opposed. Again, that motion carried, and what's very telling about that is no members of our coalition had any involvement in the generation of that idea on the part of the supervisors, and I think people are now starting to get the idea that this really is a monopolistic attempt on Goodwill's part. And it's really unfortunate, and this is not how we expect charities to behave. This is also not how you run a legislative process. And bringing a bill forth, pulling it after the opposition starts a press conference, bring it back unamended when you know it has serious problems and that the committee is concerned about it, and then suddenly pulling it at the last minute like they did this afternoon. The bill will not be considered tomorrow. And we think it's about time that this effort die, and that Goodwill realize that it has to play in the sandbox nicely with others, and it cannot use the legislative process to create an end run around what it can't achieve in the marketplace, a monopoly. And again, it sounds harsh, but we didn't ask for this fight. We are now on at least the 3rd trip this year defending against this ridiculous and ill-advised bill. And guess what? All roads point back to Goodwill of the San Joaquin Valley. And they're the ones who've hired the lobbyist here. And they have simply, it's really shameful what they've done. And they ought to just take a step back. And because all of our coalition partners would love to work with them. It's just that they don't really want to work with anybody else. They want their monopoly. And if they can't have it, they pull the bill and come back next year. And I guess the message this year is going to be, we're going to keep fighting until this is over. And whether it's here in California or whether it's in any of the other states that they're currently fighting the same fight in, whether it's town by town when they bring up banning ordinances, and we intend to hold them accountable. And again, this is we didn't ask for this. We think that this is a waste of everybody's time. We think the bill is a waste of the legislature's time. We think it was introduced entirely as a favor for special interests, and there's a reason that folks are in other legislative bodies are taking votes to oppose it, because it is simply a bad bill that's unnecessary. It's responding dramatically to a problem that doesn't really exist. And it's time that we move on. It's time that we realize that we need to spend these resources that Goodwill has spent to the tune of millions of dollars fighting for proposals like these, educating folks on the need for more recycling. Not backroom political maneuvers, not the most expensive lobbyist in Sacramento. We need to be advocating for more recycling. And at this point, they have, in essence, I think they've realized they've hit a crucial roadblock this year in that they went a little bit too far with the legislation. Our concern is not that it'll come up this year. Our concern is what are they going to do next year? And how much money are we going to have to spend defeating them next year? Rather than everybody sitting at a table working together and realizing that there's plenty of donations for everyone. And having spent a while in politics, this is probably the strangest special interest fight I've seen in a long time, and one of the saddest. And as we like to say, we did not ask for a fight with them. They picked one. And we spent a long time absorbing blow after blow, hoping that this would go away and that they'd come to their senses. They simply haven't. And we're more than prepared to work together. You would think after the first removal from committee that they would have wanted to reach out to stakeholders. They did nothing of the kind. They reached out to one stakeholder, Goodwill's lobbyist. That's it. And it's time for a new direction. And it's time for legislators to stop putting forth these bills. It's time for Goodwill to stop asking them. And it's time for us all to work together. And, I really want to focus on the positive work being done by some of the other charities that were able to be here today. Many canceled their trips in an effort to save money, given that the bill has been pulled. But I wanted to introduce Michael Moore, who's in charge of West Coast operations for Planet Aid, one of the coalition members.
Hi, thank you. My name is Michael Moore, and I manage the West Coast operations for Planet Aid, a bin operator in Southern California. And the only reason why I'm here is to oppose SB 450. I do believe, as John mentioned earlier, that we should all be working together. With Cal Recycle's stats showing that 2 billion pounds of clothing is being discarded, we all need to work together to try to stem that and remove that, keep that out of the landfills. So it's my opinion that SB 450 it really makes no sense. Planet Aid, along with other legitimate clothing recyclers, should all be working together. We want to achieve the California's 2020 mandate by having 75% of all waste being recycled. So to that end, we should all be working together. We shouldn't be fighting each other. That's a very lofty goal. That's a goal that in order for us to actually reach it, we are going to have to find a way to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I'd also like to introduce one of the typical Goodwill talking points is that the other organizations collecting used clothing don't do anything here at home, and that somehow those donations mysteriously disappear and don't benefit anybody. And so I think it's time that we bring some truth to that statement. And I'd like to introduce Julie Delgadillo, who's Director of Community Relations for Planet Aid, to discuss some of the things that we do right here in California.
Hi, good afternoon. Julie Delgadillo with Planet Aid Community Relations. Part of what we do in my department is to make sure that we ensure that some of the donations that we get go back into our local community, go back to some of the schools, go back to some of the fire department families that have maybe lost their homes, be able to provide them with clothes assistance. The other thing that we do is we work closely with the Los Angeles Fire Department, we work closely with the Los Angeles Police Department, we work with over 250 schools, we work with the Catholic Archdiocese, LAUSD, and various nonprofits throughout the Southern California area to be able to lend a hand, to work as a united front. And that's what we're asking from Goodwill. Let's work together. Let's come to the table and figure out how we make this a united front where we all win. Create a win-win for this. Thank you.
Please go.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Juan Ramazzini, expansion manager for the Gaia movement. We're based in Sacramento. We also have offices in Atascadero, but we cover mostly the northern part of California. And like the people before me here, we want to make a call and say that basically what we need to do is work together. There is plenty of recycling to come about. I think Californians need to have a chance to have the opportunity to drop off wherever they want. There is plenty to go around. Instead of fighting and discussing issues, political or legal issues, we should be discussing how we can get more used clothes and shoes to recycle throughout California. Make it easy for the consumer, make it easy to drop off whatever the consumer wants to. We have a partnership with Twin Rivers, a school district here in Sacramento, and we have made a special contribution to the program, to the school program. I'm glad to say that we were able to contribute over $31,000 in the last 11 months. So there is something to show. There is a lot to show. It's not only getting the objective of recycling clothes and shoes, but there is also funds to be generated for other purposes. And I believe that the schools in Sacramento, the schools in California, need the money. The kids need the money. So the better we get together and talk about it, the more we can help and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And the real highlight here, this is a bad bill. It's poorly thought out. It attempts to execute a complex legal concept in a delightfully simplistic manner that would cause untold chaos for charities. And when it really comes down to it, it's not about the legalese. It's not about, too many, I think, in the media have made this charity versus charity. It's not. It's David versus Goliath, and it's reality versus delusional. And the folks need to realize that supporting efforts like these hurt people, and they hurt important charities. You know, charities with missions like keeping kids off drugs, helping the environment, helping those in the developing world, and those with disabilities, you name it. It hurts them. And it's bad for business. It's anti-choice. There's not much redeeming about this effort, which lends credibility to the proposition that this was done for one reason and one reason only. Because Goodwill wanted it. And because they thought they could create a monopoly, because there's no other reason to do this. The sponsor's staff has said, this is a self-help remedy for property owners. We don't allow that in California. Your landlord cannot evict you on a self-help process. You cannot imprison people with a self-help process. There's process that you have to follow. The best analogy is cars being towed out of an office parking lot. If they're posted no parking signs, you call your towing company, they remove it. But if you do it maliciously, you're on the hook. And there's just no need for this kind of legislation. And I think it's about time that folks told the truth. And that's what we're trying to do here. It may sound harsh, but nothing else has worked. And so you're hearing a little bit of frustration. And you're hearing maybe a little anger. The folks behind me devote a lot of their time to doing good. They are now standing with me in Sacramento again. Committee, sponsor staff didn't bother to tell us that they were pulling the bill until 4 o'clock today, so we had to fly people up here. Cost money. They were telling others yesterday that it was pulled, but they didn't tell us. And, here's sort of the headline. Goodwill has cost many smaller nonprofits and other recyclables precious staff time and resources spent just defending themselves on against Goodwill's issues to literally put them out of business in California through 450. For years, they've tried to use the legislature to destroy its competition and create a monopoly. It would not. In fact, we're expecting them to attack us again, maybe with the same sponsor, maybe a different one. to apply their vast resources to outspend and outlast their much smaller targets. Instead, this only hurts people who would otherwise be benefiting from our charitable operations, but Goodwill doesn't care because they want a monopoly. And competition is good amongst those who do charitable work. It's not a bad thing. And there are so many people in need, not enough charities to meet the need. I think if you polled Californians, you polled the sponsors' constituents, they would rather us be doing charitable work and encouraging others to do the same. They'd rather Goodwill be doing that too. But they're not. The only positive of this whole experience is we think it's finally opened people's eyes to the motives behind AB 1978 last year and this year's SB 450. And any similar attempt by Goodwill in the future, here in California or elsewhere, has to be viewed through that lens that they're trying to eliminate competition. This is a strategy that started right here in Sacramento a couple years ago. We know how it started. We've watched it all the way along. And it's really shameful. And, you know, I think they may have lost their way along the way. And maybe lost in getting too big what they came to work in philanthropy for, which was supposedly to help people get job training opportunities. And it's time that they stop paying disabled folks less than minimum wage to make more money. It's time that they stop. They spent $15 million lobbying last year. That probably could have made up the difference between a lot of the sub-minimum wages they pay their disabled folks and minimum wage. $15 million went down the tubes. A lot of it lobbying for measures like this. And what a waste. And this isn't how we expect charities to behave. And they have a clever brand name. It says Goodwill. They haven't been showing it recently. And it's time for them to get back to work doing what they tell people that they do. And it's time for them to stop hiring fancy lobbyists, stop introducing bills like this. They're on the wrong side of the bill. They're on the wrong side of the issue. They're on the wrong side of their nonprofit status. And they don't have much to say about it. And it's because they know what they're doing is wrong. At the end of the day, they didn't think they would get caught. And that happens a lot in America. And they've gotten caught this time. And it's time now to move on. It's time to move on for California. It's time to move on for these charities who've spent so much money defending against this. It's time for Goodwill to stop forcing everybody to spend money. It's time for the legislature and legislators to stand up to them and say, I'm not putting this bill in this time. Enough. You've dragged me through the mud. Enough. And, you know, we actually think the sponsor's a good person. We think she's done some good things. And we actually kind of like her. And I think that this wasn't really, I'm not sure they fully told her what it was they were asking her to do. And now it's come out. The committee, to its credit, has held strong in its concerns about this bill. And, you know, we've really shed some light. And I think that we, by the way, fully expect this to be rescheduled next week with some sort of perfecting amendment to try and muscle this through again. And if so, we'll be back here again doing the same thing. And I'll leave you with this closing thought. They have sponsored a bill to basically ban collection boxes in the state of California. And we discovered today that they're now starting to use collection boxes in the state of California. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. And it's just so illogical and such a waste. And I thank you all for coming. I thank you guys for joining us. I'll be available to answer any questions.